I'm Kathy Cooper, Second Vice President, and it is my privilege to be able to introduce HANA today. So HANA MARINKOVIC was born in Belgrade, Serbia in 1983. She moved to Canada in 1989 with her mother and younger sister, who is with her today. And they joined their maternal grandparents and uncle in Edmonton in a community that she has been proud of to call home ever since. Hannah attended the University of Alberta and Concordia University College, where she completed her Bachelor of Arts with a combined focus on psychology and sociology. Following her university education in 2007, Hannah began position with Government Members Caucus as a legislative assistant to MLAs, including Dennis Harold, Dave Rodney, and Pearl Callahasson. Hannah is now the Chief of Staff for the Office of the Premier, Honorable Dave Hancock. Hannah is an active member of the Junior League of Edmonton and supports the Schizophrenia Society of Alberta annually in their Open Minds Walk and Run. She is also a former board director with the Alberta Caregivers Association. She is a dedicated family person and regards herself as a mental health and self-care advocate. She practices yoga a lot, by the sounds of it, and meditation, and has been a vegetarian for over 22 years. She and her partner, Kyle Consortia, are both self-professed foodies and share a love for travel. I've heard Hannah before, and her story is incredible, and I'm so glad she's here to tell it. So I would like you to welcome Hannah with me.
Sorry, folks, I'll just need a quick second here to set up my technology. Okay, everybody can hear me okay? All right. So thank you so much for that kind introduction, Kathy. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Hannah, and I'm so happy to be sharing my family's story with you today. I do want to start by thanking you all for sharing this precious hour of your day with me. It truly is an honor for me to have been invited to speak with you. I know many of you have traveled here from all across the province. So again, thank you for taking the time. I'm humbled by the opportunity to share the story with you and appreciate being able to invite my little sister, Mimi, here as my guest. This is the first time she's been able to hear me speak in a forum like this. So I'm grateful to be able to share the opportunity with her as well. Some of you may have heard me speak before. I'm told that about 1/3 of the trustees here are new. And for others, this may be the first time you've heard me speak. Either way, all I can truly hope for is that my family's story resonates in some unique way with each of you today and reminds you of the incredible opportunity you have every day to change lives. You've likely noticed that I'm reading from a script. The story that I tell has so many facets, complexities, different perspectives, and emotionally heavy memories. I've opted to keep to a script today so as to respect your time, to protect myself from becoming a bit too emotional to speak, which sometimes happens, and in an effort to weave my family's very complex story into a meaningful narrative for you without jumping around too much, which sometimes I tend to do when I'm speaking from memory. My family's story begins and ends with love. My grandma fell in love with her handsome, highly intellectual, and wealthy high school math teacher. And when she graduated, he made his love known for her, and they were wed. Within 2 years, my grandma not only had her first child, her daughter, my mum, but she had also separated from her husband. What she had not realized is that he had a serious mental illness himself, and that life with his untreated illness was more than she could manage at 19 years of age with a newborn. My grandmother made the difficult decision to leave her marriage for her safety as well as her daughter's. She eventually remarried an amazing man named Peter, who completely disregarded the social taboo of the times of being involved with a divorced single mother, and he pursued my grandma adamantly for months. He adopted my mom as his own, and I'm proud to call that man my grandpa today. When my grandparents first moved their family to Canada in the early 70s, they lived in Ontario, doing whatever work they could find to sustain a life for themselves, my mom, who was 14 at the time, and their 16-month-old son, my mom's half-brother. Most notably, I remember them saying that for a while they both worked on farms picking small crops like berries. I mention this because before moving to Canada, my grandma had overcome her divorce and had been the first woman in her hometown in Serbia to own her own business, a busy hair salon and the only one in town. And my grandpa was a civil planner with the municipality. In their desire to provide a greater opportunity for their family than they felt Serbia had to offer, they uprooted themselves from the successful lives they had established and moved to Canada. My grandma eventually opened her own business again here in Edmonton. She was so driven. And my grandpa worked as a custodian with Edmonton Public Schools until he retired over 10 years ago. When they had first moved to Canada, my mom experienced serious culture shock and major depression as a result of the change. So my grandparents decided to take the advice of a psychiatrist here and to let my mom move back to Serbia to live with her biological father, as she so desperately wanted. Upon her return to Serbia, at the age of 15, her father turned her away and chose to not be an active part of her life. His mental illness was still untreated, and for whatever reason, he did not have the desire or the capacity to share his life and his love with her. So she moved in with her aunt at that time, my grandma's sister, and lived with her for years after that as she finished school. She pursued singing, modeling, and acting, and started building a life for herself in Serbia, while my grandparents did the same for themselves here in Canada. By the time my mom was in her early 20s, she had met my dad at a Miss Baltic Sea pageant on Croatia's coast. She was a pageant contestant, and he was a saxophonist with the band. They were never married by choice, but they lived their lives together, eventually having me and my sister by the time they were 30. Around that time, something had started to change for them. My mom's mental health substantially deteriorated, and my dad, although highly intelligent and capable, wasn't able or willing to set aside his musician lifestyle and take care of his family in the way that he needed to. I can't remember if Mimi was born yet or not when this happened, but I remember nights in Serbia where we slept in my dad's car. We would hop around the country sleeping in the living rooms and basements of family members because we had no place to go. It became so bad after a while that my mom's aunt couldn't withhold it from my grandma anymore and had to tell her how bad it really was. It was then that my grandparents became so determined to have our family join them in Canada. They spent years working with their local MLA, the late Percy Wickman, and the federal government. And after a while, my grandparents were finally able to secure everything they needed to sponsor us so we could join them here in Edmonton. My dad stayed behind in Serbia and continued to live his life there. He served in the war shortly after we left and became a college professor by day, and continued to be a philosophical motorbike riding gypsy musician, as his mom called him, by night. I'll share more about him later. I told you there were a lot of tangents. So here we are in 1989, having just moved to Edmonton to join my grandparents and uncle, who at this point had been in Canada for about 15 years. My mom was 31, she was as old as I am now. I was 6, and Mimi was a year and a half. We'd moved in with my grandparents, who had spent years saving up to be able to afford a 4-bedroom home in Blue Quill for all of us. We all finally had our own bedrooms, our own beds, a beautiful backyard with fruit trees. I remember Mimi and I sitting in that backyard eating corn in the cob when we first moved here. It was strange, unfamiliar, and beautiful to me. But we didn't last very long with my grandparents. It turned out that my mom's dad's illness had been paranoid schizophrenia, and now my mom was living with paranoid schizophrenia. At the time of our move to Canada, she was incredibly ill. She was not taking medication and didn't have insight into her illness, which meant that she could not understand, believe, reason, or be convinced by any means that she was ill. It would be equivalent to having somebody try to convince you that you need to see a doctor because your arms are literally made out of spaghetti. It was unfathomable for her. You would argue to the death that this was not the case, that the person telling you such a ridiculous thing was in fact the one needing medical attention. The nature of this pervasive illness for my mom was such that when untreated, she didn't know or understand she was sick. She was highly unpredictable and unstable, untrusting, fearful, aggressive, violent, delusional, and unreasonable. In that early year of us having just moved to Canada, it became too hard for my grandparents to manage my mom, and too hard for my mom to cope with my grandparents' insistence that she get help that she didn't believe she needed. So within 1 year of moving here, after numerous physical altercations with my grandparents and several visits from the police, my mom took me and my sister out of my grandparents' home, and we were on our own. After a couple of nights with literally nowhere to go but a bus shelter, the three of us stayed briefly at the Wynn House. And through them, my mom was introduced to her first social worker, who helped her apply for income support and find an apartment back in Blue Quill on the south side of the city. We actually moved into an apartment building that was only 2 blocks away from my grandparents. My mom did take care of us. She paid high rent and typical bills and made meals with the modest amount of money she was receiving from the government because she could not work. We saw my grandparents on and off, depending on how my mom was feeling about them on any given day. My mom's delusions usually centered around how she believed my grandparents were trying to hurt us, and she would frequently forbid them from coming to see us. Sometimes she would welcome them when they would come. Other times she would physically chase them out with no consistency about why or when. As much as they could, my grandparents tried to be there for us without pushing my mom too much. They sacrificed so much in their lives to give us what we needed, whether it was buying groceries or school supplies, paying for piano lessons, or taking us camping in the summer. They tried to provide us with the things that they'd felt we'd left Serbia for. They wanted a better opportunity for us and spent their lives trying to provide for us. Without looking too closely, all looked relatively well with our family after we moved out from my grandparents' place, but my mom's untreated illness and her active delusions and hallucinations made life in our small apartment very difficult. When she thought that we had intentionally spilled dinner on the carpet to make her mad, when her delusions took over and she was convinced that we were conspiring against her, I wore the bruises to school the next day. When my sister would make a mess of her toys, and my mom's anger would spiral out of control, I would say it was my fault. I was bigger. I could take it. When my mom missed my dad and was up all night crying because of the hallucinations of him being in the room, then my sister and I were up all night crying with her. By the time I was in grade 2, I had recognized that my mom was very different than me, and that her world was not like my world. I was incredibly confused and sad and didn't understand how things could be so unfair, why she was hurting so much, and why my sister and I had to hurt too. By the time I started junior high, I had serious depression. I was cutting, I was drinking, I was doing drugs. I'd come to terms with the fact that my life was out of my control, and we were all going to have to live in pain for however long life would allow us, and I could not help my mom. There was nothing I could do to make it better for any of us. With how heavy it all was and how helpless and hopeless I felt, I didn't think I would live past 16. I couldn't fathom a life with that much pain for that long. I tried to hide the bruises, to not fall asleep in class from being up all night, to act like I really wanted to be wearing hand-me-downs from my uncle, to pretend like it didn't matter that I couldn't go to my friends' birthday parties because we couldn't afford for me to get them a gift. That time in my life felt like it was treading. And I wasn't alone. I had my sister there, and I had a really special bond with her. We were the only ones who really knew what was going on, the only ones who really understood each other. I was her protector. I walked with her to school. I taught her how to read. You remember that? We would sit in Nanny's walk-in closet, and I would teach you with little magnets. I felt responsible for taking care of her because without me, she would have been left alone. And she would have had to take care of and fend for herself, and I couldn't do that to her. And we also had my grandparents through those years. They were always doing what they could to help us and had sacrificed so much already. As much of a struggle as my sister and I were having with my mom, their hearts were just as burdened by feelings of guilt, abandonment, and helplessness. But their love and support for us was unwavering, and they were always there for us. For me, school and some special teachers and principals are also part of the reason why I was able to persevere. In elementary school, they saw the bags under my eyes. I think I still have them now. They saw the bags under my eyes and would excuse me from class so I could go nap in the office. I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble with this. They spent countless hours in ESL and other special classes with me so that I could learn to speak English as quickly as possible and communicate openly with them, and so that I wouldn't fall behind, and I never did. They forgave my late assignments when I had family-related reasons for being late. And being the overachiever that I was, I always stayed on the honor roll. They knew that my mom didn't let us see my grandparents as often as we wanted, so when Grandma would stop by the school and would tell the teachers and principal what was going on, they would excuse me from class so I could go visit with her in the office. They saw that I never ordered pizza lunches like the other kids, and they would quietly pitch in for me. They saw the bruises and had social workers come to the school so I could discreetly talk to somebody, although I would never say much. I didn't want to get my mom in trouble. It wasn't her fault, and I was afraid I couldn't make people understand that. They knew that I needed new snow pants and would send me home with lists of places where we could go to get free secondhand clothes for winter. There was even a teacher who knew, I'm fairly certain, that I, HANA MARINKOVIC, was the grade 3 classroom thief at Sweetgrass Elementary School taking party snacks from the drawer. I would stay behind, lingering after class, and when nobody was around, I would open up the drawer and take home frosted cookies and gummy candies to me and my sister. She quietly asked me about it once, my teacher did, and even though I adamantly denied it, and she seemed to have accepted it, I think she knew it was me. She never outed me, and that drawer was always restocked. I remember writing a particularly dark essay for a provincial exam one year where we were asked to write something about making choices. I don't remember what grade it was. But I chose to write about a fictional single mom with mental health issues and her 2 daughters, where the eldest daughter's fateful decision about a bathtub or a window, I think, resulted in the youngest daughter losing her life in an accident. It was really dark. I was screaming out for help. And thankfully, one of my teachers reached out just to simply talk to me about what was going on and where the idea had come from and what I was dealing with. At the times when I didn't know how to ask for help, my teachers were carefully listening and offering support in simple ways that I truly believe helped to save me from even deepening despair. School at that time was a safe and stable, predictable place with supportive people taking care of me in a way that I didn't get at home. At a time in my life when I didn't have the tools or capacity to help myself or my family in the ways that I thought I needed to, somebody was looking out for me. Everything changed for my family in December one year when I was in junior high. My grandparents had decided to buy us a washer and dryer for Christmas so that we wouldn't have to carry our bags of laundry to a nearby laundromat anymore. We didn't have a car because my mom couldn't drive, and even though sometimes we'd pull our bags of laundry in a small sled that my sister and I played with in the winter, my grandparents thought to give us this gift and make life a little bit simpler. They tried to explain this to my mom, but her delusions about them were so active at that time that she was convinced they were using the washer and dryer to not only emotionally manipulate her into caring for them, but that there were electronic mechanisms in the machines that would hurt and control her and our family. There was no reasoning with her about this. So instead, my grandparents and I decided to try and be a bit sneaky and hope for the best. I lied to my mom one night about not feeling well and needing to stay home instead of going to see my sister's Christmas concert. So my mom went to Mimi's concert alone, and I stayed home so I could let the delivery men in. I was excited, and I knew that my mom would initially be upset, but I'd hoped so much that she'd recover quickly when she realized how much easier life would be. No more hauling bags of garbage down the street. My mom and sister returned later that night, and when she saw what I'd done, she told me to stay home. She picked Mimi up and walked the 20 or so blocks to Heritage Mall to demand a refund for these machines that she did not ask for. I called my grandparents in tears and told them what she was doing, so my grandpa went to meet her at the mall to try and reason with her. I'm told that upon seeing my grandpa, my mom's anger was extreme, and she physically charged at him. We know there was a struggle, and the police were called. Somehow my mom's psychiatrist became involved, and thankfully, instead of being arrested, she was taken to the U of A hospital. I'm going to step back for a second to tell you a bit more about my dad at this point. In 2001, the summer that I graduated from high school, my grandma took me to Serbia for 2 months. It was my high school graduation present and a way to celebrate before I started at the U of A in the fall. My grandparents were so proud. It was and is my first and only visit. My dad was going to meet us in Serbia at the airport. It was going to be the first time that I'd seen him in almost 13 years, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. But he didn't show up, and I didn't know why. I was crushed. It was later that summer, while we were staying with my mom's aunt, my grandma's sister, that I learned that unbeknownst to my mom, my grandma, or anybody else in my family, my dad had been living with an undiagnosed and untreated mental illness for years. Days before he was supposed to meet me at the airport, the anxiety and anticipation of seeing me for the first time in 13 years overwhelmed him so much that his mom had to call the local authorities to have him institutionalized against his will because she was worried about him and felt his behavior was uncontrollable and unstable. I was told that he'd never had an episode like this before. His family and friends around him knew that he was not well, and it seems that things got much worse for him after we left Serbia to be with my grandparents. The nature of his illness was such that he was self-sufficient, working as a professor and living on his own. He was able to live his life with some normalcy for most of the time and only have episodic bad times. Similar to my mom, his illness made him slightly paranoid, and he did not see anything as wrong and would not accept help. He had pleaded with his mom to have him released quickly from the institution so he could see me that summer after having missed my airport arrival. And the tender part of her heart knew that this was a special opportunity for him and I to see each other. So he was released. My grandma and I spent a full day on a train and a half day on a bus so we could go to his hometown to spend time with him. We ended up spending less than 12 hours with him because his delusional behaviors made it so difficult. I was so completely broken. He was not like what I'd remembered from my childhood and had become quite critical, antagonizing, and delusional throughout the night. I was scared and upset and couldn't believe that my dad, whom I dreamed would reunite with my family in Canada one day, had a mental illness that nobody knew about and to this day has never been properly diagnosed. A part of me wonders if it was just coincidence that two people with mental illnesses met and fell in love on the Baltic coast when neither one of them had symptoms. If it really was true that hers developed first and his much later. A part of me wonders if maybe in the beginning they recognized this in each other. They both knew all along, and maybe they loved each other and understood each other that much more because they shared something so unique. Sadly, I did not talk to my dad again after that visit. In June 2007, my dad experienced a delusion unlike any he'd had before and drove his motorbike head-on into an oncoming vehicle in a major freeway outside of Niš in Serbia where he lived. 3 lives, including his, were lost that day. And looking back at that December in junior high, everything did change for my family. My mom was in the hospital the week before Christmas because of a washer and dryer. And after years of her untreated illness hurting her and my family, my mom was forced to make a decision. We'll never know exactly what happened to change her mind, but we believe that the honesty of her psychiatrist and the threat of losing me and my sister forced my mom to make the biggest decision of all of our lives. And she started taking medication. Since then, she hasn't skipped a single dose or a single meeting with her doctor, and has flourished into one of the most caring, kind, and dedicated mothers I know, as if making up for the years of lost time. She's not the same person that she used to be. Her psychiatrist, a man whom she trusts and now cares for as a good friend, says that her transformation and success is rare and amazing. My mom is definitely both of those things. She still lacks insight into her illness, and we don't talk about what really happened in the past. She doesn't have an honest recollection of a lot of our childhood, but she's filled the gaps with only good memories, some of which are true and some of which are not. Even though I don't live at home anymore and my sister does, my mom and I speak every day, sometimes more than once. And every single conversation we have ends with, "I love you," and her reminding me to get lots of rest, to eat properly and relax, to not work so much. She loves window shopping, antiques, crafts, and painting. She has a keen eye for decor and loves sweets. She has a huge crush on Johnny Depp, which I think is solely because he has such a strong resemblance to my dad. She offers to run errands with me just to spend time together, even if I'm just running to Costco to pick up kitty litter. She wants to be with me. When my dad so tragically lost his life, we didn't think my mom would rebound. As much as we might have dreamed that they would one day reunite later in life and spend the rest of their lives together, my mom had dreamed of the same thing. She loved him, and as he'd told me that summer that I visited him, he still loved her. He told me that he had known that she was a special person. And when my mom lost that dream of having him in her life again, we prepared ourselves for the worst. But my mom was so much stronger than we thought. She grieved the loss of her love and still grieves, but she says that she gets her strength through me and my sister, and that despite being lonely, she has lots of love in her life. We lost my grandma, my mom's mom, 3 years ago. She had succumbed to a very aggressive cancer that took her life in less than 2 months. Despite the years of delusional anger that she may have had towards her mom for the years that her illness wasn't treated, my mom loved her mom with her whole heart and still sleeps with a picture of her under her pillow. She recognizes that she lost someone who devoted her life to caring for her and says that she lost her best friend. We lost my mom's aunt and her biological father in the last 3 years as well. Through all the loss, my mom has remained incredibly strong, acknowledging her pain but determined to appreciate each day and appreciate the love that she has in her life now. She still has delusions that aren't anywhere as pervasive as the ones she had before, and she isn't very good with her finances, but she continually surprises me with her optimism, strength, forgiveness, and faith in the good of people. In some capacity, my sister and I will continue to be caregivers for our mom for the rest of our lives. But we do this from a place of love, knowing that we have each other for support. As I noted in the beginning, our story starts and ends with love. Our family has so much love. My mom tells me every day that she's proud of me, even though I don't spend as much time with her as both of us would like and have to reschedule our plans because of the unpredictable hours and high-stress nature of my work. I know that I wouldn't be where I am today without my mom. She is a light in my life and has taught me more about love, forgiveness, compassion, and gratitude than I can put into words. I would not be who I am without her being exactly who she is, without having grown up exactly as I did, without the selfless love and support of my great aunt in Serbia when we needed her so much, without a little sister to take care of, without the unwavering love and sacrifices of my grandparents, and certainly without the stability and consistency of care that I got from school and from my teachers. I wouldn't have gotten through those darkest days of my childhood without the support of the special people in my schools who recognized a vulnerable, scared child and offered support. I think that teachers, educators, and all those associated with the administration and governance of the education system are such special people by nature. And those at the front end are a consistent, daily, stable, and reliable support for the kids in their classrooms. For some of these kids, they may be the only consistent support that they have, and school may be the only stable environment that they know. Whether or not it is recognized, acknowledged, or obvious on a day-to-day basis, there is a ripple effect of change happening every day inside a school. Schools, classrooms, and teachers are changing lives. My family's story is only one example of a family once deemed to be at risk, having survived and thrived through hard times, and having come out better on the back nine. My family's story is only one story. There are so many out there. I hope that our story resonates in some way with you and reminds you of that heartwarming, heart-opening, inspiring love that I know you all have for your work and the kids inside your schools. My hope is that that love and passion you have resonates clearly through all the difficult times you might have as you do the work that you do. There are countless families in a better place because of you. Mine is only one. Thank you.